The NBA is one of the most watched sports leagues in the world, and with that fame comes a certain image to uphold. To keep its reputation clean and its product marketable, the league has always taken a firm stance against behavior that could damage its brand. And while it hasn't always been perfect, the NBA's disciplinary actions over the years have made headlines, especially when it comes to drug use. Let's start with performance-enhancing drugs, or PEDs. Now, basketball isn't typically the first sport you think of when it comes to steroid use. The game is more about finesse, athleticism, and endurance than brute strength. But that hasn't stopped a handful of players from trying to gain an edge. One of the earliest high-profile suspensions was Gilbert Arenas, who was hit with a 20-game ban after testing positive for methanolone, an anabolic steroid. That was a wake-up call. Until then, drug suspensions were mostly tied to substances like marijuana or cocaine. After Arenas, Nick Calades was suspended 20 games for using tamoxifen, which he claimed was for preventing hair loss. Given the state of his hairline, some fans gave him a pass. A few years later, Joakim Noah received the same 20-game suspension while with the Knicks, earning $18 million a year to basically sit on the bench. In his words, New York was too lit, and maybe that's why he failed his drug test. The NBA eventually toughened its stance. Today, a PED suspension lands you with a 25-game ban. Just ask DeAndre Ayton and John Collins. Both players missed a quarter of the season during the 2019 to 2020 campaign, Ayton for a banned diuretic and Collins for using a growth hormone stimulant. Others like Jody Meeks and Wilson Chandler followed with similar infractions in the following years. It's important to note that the league didn't even test for certain substances like HGH until recently. Back in the day, players like Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes would joke about how easy it was to pass drug tests. They'd get tested once a year and could basically party without worry. Those days? Long gone. This shift in policy has led to more accountability, but also a lot more suspensions. And as the NBA tightened its grip, players were forced to think twice about what they put in their bodies. Not all NBA suspensions come from drug tests. Some come from raw emotion, heat-of-the-moment decisions, and straight-up chaos on the court. When emotions explode and fists fly, the NBA has to step in, and sometimes the consequences are career-defining. Let's rewind to December 9, 1977, a date that still echoes through NBA history. Kermit Washington, a strong 6 feet 8 inches forward for the Lakers, was involved in what many still call the most devastating punch ever thrown in an NBA game. It started as a routine scuffle with Kevin Cunnert of the Houston Rockets. Some pushing, some shoving, nothing out of the ordinary in a physical game. But then it escalated. As the fight started to break up, Rudy Tomjanovich, a respected all-star forward for the Rockets, ran toward the group to try and calm things down. Washington, perhaps not realizing Rudy's intentions, turned around and delivered a full-force punch to Tomjanovich's face. It wasn't just a punch, it was a life-threatening blow. The impact was so brutal that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar said it sounded like a watermelon hitting concrete. Tomjanovich dropped instantly. Blood pooled beneath him on the hardwood. He suffered a fractured skull, a broken nose and jaw, and a brain injury that caused spinal fluid to leak into his skull capsule. Doctors later said he was inches from death. The NBA responded quickly, handing Kermit Washington a 26-game suspension, at the time, the longest ever for an on-court incident. It was a turning point for how the league handled violence. Tomjanovich made a miraculous recovery, eventually returning to the court and later coaching the Rockets to 2 NBA championships. Washington, however, never shook the stigma of that moment. Fast forward a few decades, and we arrive at one of the most shocking locker room stories the NBA has ever seen: guns in the arena. It was the 2009 to 2010 season. Gilbert Arenas, a 3-time All-Star and eccentric personality, got into a gambling dispute with teammate Javaris Crittenton over a card game called Brawls, a favorite among NBA players, often played during team flights. Things got tense. Really tense. Crittenton allegedly threatened to shoot Arenas during an argument. Arenas, never one to back down, and apparently not realizing the gravity of the situation, showed up to the locker room days later with 4 guns, laying them out like he was playing a twisted game of pick one and go for it. To Arenas, it was a joke. But to Crittenton, not so much. He pulled out a loaded gun of his own, and suddenly it wasn't funny anymore. Word got out fast. The NBA doesn't tolerate weapons in its arenas. Commissioner David Stern acted swiftly, suspending Gilbert Arenas for 50 games, while Crittenton received a 38-game suspension. Arenas never fully recovered his career momentum after that, and Crittenton? He never played in the NBA again. And it wasn't the last time violence and chaos turned into historic bans. These suspensions weren't just punishments, they were warnings. They reminded players that no matter how famous or talented they are, there are lines you just don't cross in professional sports. The NBA is no stranger to heated moments, but every once in a while, A player goes too far, and the consequences are unforgettable. In this section, we dive into two of the most notorious incidents in league history, one that happened in a practice gym and one that turned into a full-blown riot in front of 20,000 fans. Let's start in 1997 with a name that still makes headlines for all the wrong reasons: Latrell Sprewell. Sprewell was no average player. He was a three-time All-Star, an All-NBA first-teamer, and the face of the Golden State Warriors at the time. He was intense, competitive, and known for his fiery personality. But no one expected what happened during a routine practice. When head coach PJ Carlesimo told Sprewell to make better passes, something snapped. Instead of brushing it off, Sprewell walked over and physically attacked his coach, grabbing him by the neck and choking him for about 10 seconds. Coaches and staff rushed in to break it up. And just when everyone thought it was over, Sprewell returned 20 minutes later to confront Carlesimo again, this time throwing a punch. It was unprecedented. The NBA and the Warriors responded harshly. Sprewell was suspended for the remainder of the season, 82 games without pay. That was later reduced to 68 games, but by then, the damage was done. His reputation took a major hit. He'd eventually play for the New York Knicks and even help lead them to the NBA Finals in 1999, but he was never able to fully escape the shadow of that moment. The image of a player physically assaulting his own coach became one of the league's darkest headlines. But if that moment was shocking, what happened in 2004 was historic. They called it the Malice at the Palace, and to this day, it remains the most chaotic, infamous, and heavily punished incident in NBA history. The Indiana Pacers were visiting the defending champion Detroit Pistons at the Palace of Auburn Hills. With under a minute left in the game and Indiana holding a comfortable 15-point lead, Ron Artest, known for his physical play and short temper, committed a hard foul on Ben Wallace under the basket. Wallace shoved him. Artest stepped back, trying to cool down, and then did something strange. He laid down on the scorer's table to avoid further escalation. But the situation escalated anyway. A fan named John Green launched a cup of Diet Coke from the stands, and it hit Artest square in the chest. That's when all hell broke loose. Artest leaped into the crowd, charging at fans, swinging wildly. His teammate Stephen Jackson followed, joining the brawl. In seconds, it turned into an all-out melee between players and fans. Punches were thrown. Drinks and chairs flew through the air. Jermaine O'Neal sprinted toward a fan who had run onto the court and knocked him down with a powerful punch. The broadcast cut to black. Commentators were stunned. Fans were terrified. Security couldn't regain control. The NBA had seen fights before, but never like this. Commissioner David Stern called it the worst night in NBA history. The punishments matched the chaos. Ron Artest was suspended for the rest of the season, a staggering 86 games. Stephen Jackson got 30 games, and Jermaine O'Neal received 25, which was later reduced to 15. In total, players lost over $11 million in salary. The Malice at the Palace wasn't just a black eye for the NBA, it changed the league forever. It led to stricter security protocols, a new fan conduct policy, and a reevaluation of how the league handles conflict on and off the court. These incidents, Sprewell's chokehold and the Palace Brawl, serve as reminders that even the world's best athletes can lose control. And when they do, the consequences are swift, severe, and unforgettable. So far, we've talked about drug suspensions, on-court violence, locker room chaos, and fan brawls. But there's another level of punishment that only a few players in NBA history have faced: full-on bans from the league. These aren't temporary suspensions. These are career-threatening decisions, handed down when a player crosses a line that the NBA considers unforgivable. Let's start with a name that's still fresh in the minds of many fans: Tyreke Evans. Once considered one of the league's rising stars, Evans came into the NBA with high expectations. He won Rookie of the Year in 2010, averaging over 20 points per game for the Sacramento Kings and joining a very exclusive club of rookies who had put up 20-5-5 stat lines, alongside names like LeBron James and Michael Jordan. But by 2019, Evans' career had taken a dramatic turn. On May 17th, the NBA announced that Tyreke Evans was being dismissed and disqualified from the league for violating its anti-drug program. The penalty? A 2-year ban with no eligibility to even apply for reinstatement until 2021. No specifics were released about the exact substance, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just PEDs or marijuana. This was a serious infraction, likely involving drugs of abuse such as cocaine or opiates, which fall under the NBA's most severe category of violations. Evans' case wasn't the first, and sadly, it wasn't the last. Let's rewind to 2016, when another highly touted player faced the same fate: O.J. Mayo. Drafted 3rd overall in 2008, Mayo was a gifted scorer and a lethal three-point shooter. Early in his career, he looked like a future star, averaging 18.5 points per game as a rookie. But like Evans, Mayo's career began to spiral. After several violations and a decline in performance, the NBA dropped the hammer in 2016. He was banned from the league, with eligibility to return only after serving a 2-year suspension. Unfortunately, he never applied for reinstatement. His once promising career effectively ended at the age most players are just hitting their prime. And then there's Chris Andersen, better known as Birdman. Famous for his tattoos, mohawk, and energy off the bench, Birdman had his own brush with the league's harshest punishment. In 2006, he was banned from the NBA under the same anti-drug policy. But unlike some others, Andersen worked his way back, got reinstated in 2008, and eventually became a fan favorite during the Miami Heat's 2013 championship run alongside LeBron James. In total, 9 players in NBA history have been hit with multi-year bans for drug abuse. These aren't like 10-game suspensions or fines, they're total exiles from the league. To return, players must undergo treatment, apply for reinstatement, and be cleared by both the NBA and the Players Association. It's a long, difficult road, and not everyone makes it back. These full-scale bans serve a critical purpose: to protect the integrity of the league, send a message to players, and uphold the NBA's brand. They also reflect a larger reality, that for all the glamour and glory of professional basketball, players still deal with real-life struggles. And sometimes, those struggles go far beyond the hardwood. Some bounce back, some don't. But one thing is certain, the longest and harshest NBA suspensions don't just affect the player's career. They define it.